The officer pulls you over, walks up to the window, and asks a question that seems harmless. Whose car is this? Sounds silly, right? But that simple question has already sent people to court, cost people their license, and gotten people into huge trouble, just because they answered the wrong way. If you don't know exactly what to say in that moment, you're exposed. And most people make this mistake without even realizing it. Stick with me until the end, because I'm going to show you exactly the phrase that protects you and what you should never say in that moment. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe to the channel, because this information could literally save you during a stop. Have you ever stopped to wonder why, in almost every traffic stop in the United States, the officer asks, "Whose car is this?" It seems like a silly, almost automatic bit of curiosity, but it's not. That question serves a very specific purpose. It opens the door for you to say more than you should. Think about it. You're driving on a highway in Florida, an avenue in Houston, or some street in Ohio. The car isn't yours. It belongs to your brother, your girlfriend, it's financed in your mother's name, or it's even a rental from a car rental company. The officer walks up, asks for your license and the vehicle's registration, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation drops, "Is this car yours?" Most people in that moment don't want to look suspicious, so they start explaining. "No, it's my brother's. He's traveling. I borrowed it to carry my stuff." And just like that, without realizing it, you've opened a door that used to be closed. This happens because, in the United States, you have a right, guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, not to incriminate yourself and not to provide information beyond what's legally required during a traffic stop. In most states, what you're required to present is your driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. Period. You're not required to tell the life story of the car. The problem is, nobody teaches you this. You learn to drive, you learn to parallel park, but nobody sits down with you and explains what to do when an officer starts asking questions that go beyond the basics. And it's exactly in that information gap that a lot of good people, people who haven't done anything wrong, end up tripping themselves up. The issue isn't about being evasive or seeming like you have something to hide. It's about understanding the difference between objectively answering what was asked and starting to narrate your entire life story, your relationship with the car's owner, why you borrowed it, where you're headed. Every extra detail you add is a new door opening, and you don't know where it leads. Let me show you exactly how this usually goes wrong in practice, with the most common mistakes I've seen drivers make in this exact situation. Let me tell you about the pattern I see repeated, almost word for word, in hundreds of cases I've followed. The officer asks, "Whose car is this?" And the driver, trying to be nice, trying to seem cooperative, starts putting together a whole explanation. "Oh, it's my brother's. He's traveling to Texas and I'm using his car this week. Actually, I'm on my way to drop off some documents for a friend of his right now." Sounds harmless, right? But notice what just happened there. You gave the name of a person who wasn't even present. You gave a reason for using the vehicle. You gave a destination, a purpose, and you even brought a third person into the story. That's no longer just answering a question. That's opening up an entire investigation into your private life. And the worst part, every new piece of information you give becomes a hook for the next question. Does your brother know you have his car? Did he authorize it in writing? Can you prove that? Who's this friend you're dropping documents off for? Suddenly, a routine traffic stop that should have taken 5 minutes has turned into a 20-minute interrogation. This happens anywhere in the United States, on a highway in Georgia, on a corner in Chicago, on a road in Arizona. And the driver, in their own mind, thinks they're being honest and cooperative. But over-cooperation during a police stop doesn't protect you. It exposes you. The core point here is simple. The more you talk, the more material you're handing the officer to work with. And I'm not saying lie or be rude or create a confrontation. I'm saying there's a huge difference between being polite and being an open book. You can be extremely respectful, keep a calm tone, look the officer in the eye, and still answer in a limited way. That's not impoliteness. That's protection. Because like it or not, a traffic stop is a moment when anything you say can be recorded, written down, and used later, whether in a report or in a hearing. A lot of good people, hardworking people, people who've never had a run-in with the law, have gotten themselves tangled up simply because they wanted to seem overly helpful, and that's something that can be avoided with a simple change in how you respond. So, what's the right way to answer when the officer asks, "Whose car is this?" The answer varies depending on your situation, but in every case the principle is the same. Be direct, be truthful, and don't add information that wasn't asked for. If the car is yours, the answer is simple. It's mine. Period. You don't need to explain how long you've had the car, how you paid for it, or any other detail. A short, direct sentence, and that's it. If the car belongs to someone else, your brother, your mother, a friend, the answer can still be short. It belongs to a family member, or it's borrowed. You don't need to give a name. You don't need to explain the reason for borrowing it. You don't need to say where you're headed. If the officer wants more specific details, they'll ask, and then you can decide calmly how much you want to share. But you're not obligated to get ahead of questions that haven't even been asked yet. And if you genuinely don't know who's registered as the car's owner, because you borrowed it from an acquaintance, or it's a family car and nobody's quite sure whose name it's in, the safest answer is exactly that truth. I'm not sure, the car isn't mine. That's not suspicious. That's honest. And it's infinitely better than making up a name or a story that later doesn't match what's in the officer's system. Here's a crucial point. Never, under any circumstances, provide false information about vehicle ownership. In the United States, lying to an officer during a traffic stop can constitute a separate crime, depending on the state. In many places, this is treated as a false statement or even obstruction. In other words, you can turn a simple traffic stop into a criminal matter just because you tried to seem more secure than you actually were. So here's the rule. Answer with the truth, answer briefly, and resist the urge to fill the silence with explanations. Silence during a stop isn't rudeness. It's strategy. And it doesn't change the fact that you're being cooperative. It just changes how much unnecessary ammunition you're handing over. But the officer doesn't always settle for that short answer, and that's when things can get more tense. Sometimes you answer briefly and politely, and the officer simply accepts it and moves on with the stop as normal. But sometimes they push. They ask again, in a different way. Okay, but why do you have his car? Or, does he know you're using the vehicle? In that moment, a lot of people feel psychological pressure to prove that everything's fine. And that's exactly when a person starts tripping themselves up, trying to build a longer and longer explanation to convince the officer. Here's an important point. You don't need to convince anyone of your innocence during a traffic stop. You're not in a courtroom. You don't need to present evidence. You don't need to build an argument. What you need is to keep answering with simple facts without trying to guess what the officer is thinking or what they will or won't accept as an answer. If the question is, why are you driving this car? An answer like, I'm using a family member's car today is already enough. You don't need to detail the specific reason, the destination, what time you picked up the car, or any timeline. If the officer keeps pushing for more details, you can, very politely, say something like, that's all the information I have, or that's all I can tell you right now. That's not disrespectful. It's simply recognizing that there's a line between basic identification and an investigation into your personal life. In the United States, during a routine traffic stop, the officer has the authority to check your license, vehicle registration, insurance, and observe any visible violations. They don't automatically have the right to demand that you narrate your entire relationship with the car's owner unless there are concrete factors that justify greater suspicion. The most common mistake in this moment is when a person starts creating contradictions without realizing it. They say one thing at the start of the stop, and 5 minutes later, trying to explain themselves better, end up saying something slightly different. And any difference between the two versions, no matter how small, can be used against you later. So the strategy in this moment of pressure is simple. Keep your answer consistent with what you've already said. Don't add new details just because you felt pressured by the silence, and recognize when a question has already moved beyond vehicle identification and into a broader investigation of your life. Now, I want to make one point very clear that resolves a lot of the anxiety people feel in this situation. Being pulled over while driving a car that isn't yours doesn't automatically make you a suspect of anything, and it definitely doesn't make you responsible for any violation committed during that stop. Think about how many completely normal situations involve someone driving a car that's not in their name. A couple where only one of them is on the loan, but both of them drive the car. A kid using their parents' car to get to work. An employee driving a vehicle registered to the company. Someone who rented a car from a rental company in Miami, Orlando, or Las Vegas. None of these situations is illegal, and none of them requires an elaborate explanation. A traffic ticket, speeding, a burnt-out headlight, not using a turn signal, is issued to the driver at the time of the violation, not to the registered owner of the vehicle. These are legally separate matters. This means that even if the car is registered in someone else's name, responsibility for how you were driving in that moment is yours, not the car owner's. And the reverse is also true. The simple fact that the car is yours doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Understanding that separation is what eliminates a lot of the nervousness that leads people to over-explain. Once you understand that whose car is this and who's responsible for the violation are completely different questions, it becomes much easier to stay calm and answer only what was asked, without feeling like you need to justify your existence inside that vehicle. This applies to borrowed family cars, rental cars, cars financed in someone else's name, company vehicles, basically any situation where the name on the registration isn't yours. In none of these cases do you need to feel obligated to prove your good faith through a lengthy explanation. Knowing this completely changes how you carry yourself during a stop. You stop reacting out of fear and start responding with clarity. And that clarity is exactly what separates a smooth traffic stop from a situation that gets complicated for no reason. If this content helped you better understand your rights during a traffic stop, hit like right now and subscribe to the channel. Every week, we bring you real information to help you protect yourself and avoid falling into simple traps that can turn into big problems. Subscribe, hit the bell, and don't miss the next videos.